forgive me if I croak. It's because I had a stroke. Basal ganglion on the right made me walk as if I'm tight. Couldn't sing for groans and squawking. Sometimes still affects my talking. That was a lovely introduction. Thank you very much. As you know, this was supposed to be in Berkeley with an interviewer on stage. Due to circumstances beyond my control, here we are, and I'm so delighted to be here. And thank you all for coming here, and thank you to the shop for putting on this event at such incredibly short notice. Yeah, let's have this. Peter Medawar, the great Nobel Prize-winning biologist and a personal hero of mine, once began a lecture with these words: "I hope I shall not be thought ungracious if I say at the outset that nothing on earth would have induced me to attend the kind of lecture you may think I'm about to give. I hope I shall not be thought ungracious if I say at the outset that if you've come in hopes that the word soul in my title betokens some sort of conversion, you're going to be disappointed. I'd better begin by explaining what I mean by that, by reading from the chapter called 50 Years On, Killing the Soul. 50 years on, science will have killed the soul. What a terrible, soulless thing to say, but only if you misunderstand it. Easily done, admittedly. There are two meanings, soul one and soul two, superficially confusable, but deeply different. The following definition from the Oxford English Dictionary conveys what I'm calling soul one. I should explain that I shall be doing mostly readings with a sort of connecting patter in between. So soul one, the spiritual part of man regarded as surviving after death and as susceptible of happiness or misery in a future state. Soul one, the soul that science is going to destroy, is supernatural, disembodied, survives the death of the brain, and is capable of happiness or misery, even when the neurons are dust and the hormones dry. Science is going to kill it stone dead. Soul two, however, will never be threatened by science. On the contrary, science is its twin and handmaiden. This definition, also from the OED, conveys various aspects of soul two. Intellectual or spiritual power, high development of the mental faculties, also in somewhat weakened sense, deep feeling, sensitivity. Einstein was a great exponent of soul two in science, and Carl Sagan was a virtuoso. Unweaving the Rainbow is my own modest celebration. Or listen to the great Indian astrophysicist Subramanian Chandrasekhar. This shuddering before the beautiful, this incredible fact that a discovery motivated by a search after the beautiful in mathematics should find its exact replica in nature, persuades me to say that beauty is that to which the human mind responds at its deepest and most profound. That soul too, the kind of soulfulness that science courts and loves, from which it will never be parted. The rest of this chapter refers only to soul one. Soul one is rooted in the dualistic theory that there's something non-material about life, some non-physical, vital principle. It's the theory according to which a body has to be animated by an anima, vitalized by a vital force, energized by some mysterious energy, spiritualized by a spirit, made conscious by a mystical thing or substance called consciousness. It is no accident that all those characteristics of soul one are circular. Julian Huxley memorably satirized Henri Bergson's life force, élan vital, by suggesting that a railway engine works by élan locomotif. Incidentally, it's a lamentable fact that Bergson is still the only scientist ever to win the Nobel Prize in Literature. Science has already battered and wasted Soul 1. Within 50 years, it will extinguish it altogether. This book is a collection of essays, reviews, lectures, obituaries, mostly published already, though in many cases not here in America. And I've added extensive footnotes and afterwords, which can be seen, as you've heard already, can be seen as a kind of dialogue between me now and me when I wrote the original. There's also an introductory essay which is completely new, and I'm going to read part of that now. I am writing this 2 days after a breathtaking visit to Arizona's Grand Canyon. Breathtaking still hasn't gone the way of awesome, though I fear it may. To many Native American tribes, the Grand Canyon is a sacred place, site of numerous origin myths from the Havasupai to the Zuni, hushed repose of the Hopi dead. If I were forced to choose a religion, that's the kind of religion I could go for. The Grand Canyon confers stature on a religion, outclassing the petty smallness of the Abrahamics, the three squabbling cults which, through historical accident, still afflict the world. In the dark night, I walked out along the south rim of the canyon, lay down on a low wall and gazed up at the Milky Way. I was looking back in time, witnessing a scene from 100,000 years ago, but that is when the light set out on its long quest to dive through my pupils and spark my retinas. At dawn the following morning, I returned to the spot, shuddered with vertigo as I realized where I had been lying in the dark. I looked down towards the canyon's floor. Again, I was gazing into the past, 2 billion years in this case, back to a time when only microbes stirred sightless beneath the Milky Way. If Hopi souls were sleeping in that majestic hush, they were joined by the rock-bound ghosts of trilobites and crinoids, brachiopods and belemnites, ammonites, even dinosaurs. Was there some point in the mile-long evolutionary progression up the canyon strata when something you could call a soul sprang into existence, like a light suddenly switched on? Or did the soul creep stealthily into the world, a dim thousandth of a soul in a pulsating tube worm, a tenth of a soul in a coelacanth, half a soul in a tarsier, then a typical human soul, eventually a soul on the scale of a Beethoven or a Mandela? Or is it just silly to speak of souls at all? Not silly if you mean something like an overwhelming sense of subjective personal identity. Each one of us knows we possess it, even if, as many modern thinkers aver, it is an illusion. An illusion constructed, as Darwinians might speculate, because a coherent agency of singular purpose helps us to survive. And I'll skip a bit and go on from the same chapter a bit later. I write this in November 2016, bleak month in a bleak year, when the phrase "barbarians at the gates" tempts without irony. Within the gates, rather, for the calamities that have struck the two most populous nations in the English-speaking world in 2016 are self-inflicted, wounds dealt not by an earthquake or a military coup d'etat, but by the democratic process itself. More than ever, reason needs to take center stage. Far be it from me to devalue emotion. I love music, literature, poetry, and the warmth, both mental and physical, of human affection. But emotion should know its place. Political decisions, decisions of state, policies for the future, should flow from clear thinking, rational consideration of all the options, the evidence bearing upon them, and their likely consequences. Gut feelings, even when they don't arise from the stirred, dark waters of xenophobia, misogyny, or other blind prejudice, should stay out of the voting booth. For some time now, such murky emotions have remained largely under the surface. But in 2016, political campaigns on both sides of the Atlantic brought them out into the open, made them, if not respectable, at least freely expressed. demagogues led by example and proclaimed open season for prejudices which had for half a century been shamed into hole-and-corner secrecy. Whatever may be the innermost feelings of individual scientists, science itself works by rigorous adherence to objective values. There is objective truth out there, and it is our business to find it. Science has in place disciplined precautions against personal bias, confirmation bias, prejudgment of issues before the facts are in. Experiments are repeated. Double-blind trials exclude the pardonable desires of scientists to be proved right, and the more laudable bending over backwards to maximize our opportunity to be proved wrong. An experiment done in New York can be replicated by a lab in New Delhi, and we expect the conclusion to be the same, regardless of geography or the cultural or historic biases of the scientists. Would that other academic disciplines, such as theology, could say the same. Philosophers happily speak of continental philosophy as opposed to analytical philosophy. Philosophy departments in America or in British universities might seek a new appointment to cover the continental tradition. Can you imagine a science department advertising for a new professor to cover continental chemistry? Or the Eastern tradition in biology? The very idea is a bad joke. That says something about the values of science and is not kind to those of philosophy. The next chapter carries on that theme, but I'm not going to read from it. It's called The Values of Science and the Science of Values. I'm going to jump ahead to a lecture that I gave on BBC Radio just before the turn of the millennium. I was one of a group of lecturers invited by the BBC to, as they said, sound the century. Look back on the 20th century and look forward to the 21st. The other lecturers included Gore Vidal, Camille Paglia, and George Steiner. I was uncomfortably conscious that there were no other scientists on the list, hence my opening sentences. It's called Science and Sensibility. With trepidation and humility, I find myself the only scientist in this list of lecturers. Does it really fall to me alone to sound the century for science, to reflect on the science that we bequeath to our heirs? The 20th could be science's golden century, the age of Einstein, Hawking, relativity, of Planck, Heisenberg and quantum theory, of Watson, Crick, Sanger and molecular biology, of Turing, von Neumann and the computer, of Wiener, Shannon and cybernetics, of plate tectonics and radioactive dating of the rocks, of Hubble's redshift and the Hubble telescope, of Fleming, Florey and penicillin, of moon landings, and let's not duck the issue of the hydrogen bomb. As George Steiner has noted, more scientists are working today than in all other centuries combined. Though also, to put that figure into alarming perspective, more people are alive today than have died since the dawn of recorded history. When I tweeted that, a lot of people objected because they didn't read the word recorded. Recorded history can't really begin until the invention of writing. Of the dictionary meanings of sensibility, I intend discernment, awareness, and the capacity for responding to aesthetic stimuli. One might have hoped that by century's end, science would have been incorporated into our culture, and our aesthetic sense have risen to meet the poetry of science. Without reviving the mid-century pessimism of C.P. Snow, I reluctantly find that with only 2 years to run, these hopes are not realized. Science provokes more hostility than ever, sometimes with good reason, often from people who know nothing about it, and use their hostility as an excuse not to learn. Depressingly, many people still fall for the discredited cliché that scientific explanation corrodes poetic sensibility. Astrology books outsell astronomy. Television beats a path to the door of second-rate conjurers masquerading as psychics and clairvoyants. Cult leaders mine the millennium and find rich scenes of gullibility. Heaven's Gate, Waco, poison gas in the Tokyo underground. The biggest difference from the last millennium is that folk Christianity has been joined by folk science fiction. It should have been so different. The previous millennium, there was some excuse. In 1066, only with hindsight, Halley's comet could forebode Hastings, sealing Harold's fate and Duke William's victory. Comet Hale-Bopp in 1997 should have been different. Why do we feel gratitude when a newspaper astrologer reassures his readers that Hale-Bopp was not directly responsible for Princess Diana's death? And what is going on when 39 people, driven by a theology compounded of Star Trek and the Book of Revelation, commit collective suicide, neatly dressed and with overnight bags packed by their sides, because they all believe that Hale-Bopp was accompanied by a spaceship come to raise them to a new plane of existence? Incidentally, the same Heaven's Gate commune had ordered an astronomical telescope to look at Hale-Bopp. They sent it back when it came, because it was obviously defective. It failed to show the accompanying spaceship. I am sometimes rebuked for my elitism. Terrible word, but maybe not such a terrible thing. There's a great difference between an exclusive snobbery, which no one should condone, and a striving to help people raise their game and swell the elite. A calculated dumbing down is the worst, condescending and patronizing. When I said this in a lecture in the United States once, the questioner at the end, no doubt with a warm glow in his white male heart, had the remarkable cheek to suggest that dumbing down might be especially necessary to bring minorities and women to science. A later chapter is called The Dead Hand of Plato. It's about what I call the tyranny of the discontinuous mind. It's a long chapter. It's about our tendency to see discontinuities where none exist, but there's actually a continuous distribution. It's a long-developed argument. This is a brief extract about American politics, which I hope you won't think is too presumptuous of me. In US presidential elections, every state, except Maine and Nebraska, has to end up labeled either Democrat or Republican, no matter how evenly divided the voters in that state might be. Each state sends to the Electoral College a number of delegates which is proportional to the population of the state. So far, so good. But the discontinuous mind, that's the sort of catchphrase of the whole chapter, the discontinuous mind insists that all the delegates from a given state have to vote the same way. This winner-take-all system was shown up in all its fatuity in the 2000 election, when there was a dead heat in Florida. Al Gore and George Bush received the same number of votes as each other, the tiny disputed difference being well within the margin of error. Florida sent 25 delegates to the Electoral College. The Supreme Court was asked to decide which candidate should receive all 25 votes, and therefore the presidency. Since it was a dead heat, it might have seemed reasonable for the Supreme Court to allot 13 votes to one candidate and 12 to the other. It would have made no difference whether Bush or Gore received the 13 votes. Either way, Gore would have been president. Indeed, Gore could have given Bush 22 of the 25 Electoral College delegates, and still Gore would have won the presidency. I'm not saying the Supreme Court should actually have split the Florida delegates. They had to abide by the rules, no matter how idiotic. I would say that, given the lamentable constitutional rule that the 25 votes had to be bound together as a one-party bloc, natural justice should have led the court to allocate the 25 votes to the candidate who would have won the election if the Florida delegates had been divided, namely Gore. Skipping to the end of the chapter on the discontinuous mind. Scientists are called upon by governments, by courts of law, and by the public at large to give a definite, absolute, yes or no answer to important questions. For example, questions of risk. Whether it's a new medicine, a new weed killer, a new power station, a new airliner, the scientific, quote, expert is peremptorily asked, is it safe, Answer the question, yes or no, is it safe? Vainly, the scientist tries to explain that safety and risk are not absolutes. Some things are safer than others, and nothing is perfectly safe. There's a sliding scale of intermediates and probabilities, not hard and fast discontinuities between safe and unsafe. I don't want to give the impression that the book is all or even mainly about politics and serious things like that in relationship to science. There's a lot more in the book of a very different character. For example, there's a comedy section which includes 2 parodies of my favorite comic author, P.G. Wodehouse. Is P.G. Wodehouse read?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, great. Oh, good. I'm so pleased. In my 2 chapters, Jeeves explains to Bertie Wooster atheism and evolution. There are rather a lot of sort of cricket metaphors and things like that, so please forgive those. There's also a chapter on Dr. Doolittle, a fictional character whom I loved as a child and who I think actually influenced my life. The chapter is called Doolittle and Darwin. Maybe obsessive reading imprints a love of words in a child, and perhaps it later assists the craft of writing. In particular, I wonder whether the formative influence that eventually led to my becoming a zoologist might have been a children's book, Hugh Lofting's The Adventures of Dr. Doolittle, which I read again and again, along with its numerous sequels. This series of books did not turn me on to science in any direct sense, but Dr. Doolittle was a sort of scientist, the world's greatest naturalist and a thinker of restless curiosity. Long before either phrase was coined, he was a role model who raised my consciousness. John Doolittle was an amiable country doctor who turned from human patients to animals. Polynesia, his parrot, taught him to speak the languages of animals, and this single skill provided the plots of nearly a dozen books. Where other books for children, including today's Harry Potter series, profligately invoke the supernatural as a panacea for all difficulties, Hugh Lofting rationed himself to a single alteration of reality, as in science fiction. Dr. Doolittle could speak to animals. From this, all else followed. When he was appointed to run the post office of the West African kingdom of Fantipo, he recruited migrant birds into the world's first airmail service. Small birds carried a single letter each, storks large parcels. When his ship needed a turn of speed to overtake the wicked slave trader Davy Bones, thousands of gulls gave him a tow, and a child's imagination soared. The footnote there. I remember shamelessly plagiarizing this image in a school essay when I was about 9. My English teacher praised my imagination and predicted that I'd grow up to be a famous writer. Little did he know I stole it from Hugh Lofting. When Dr. Doolittle got within range of the slaving vessel, a swallow's keen eyesight aimed his cannon to superhuman accuracy. When a man was framed for murder, Dr. Doolittle persuaded the judge to allow the accused bulldog to take the stand as the only witness into his innocence, having established the bulldog's credentials as interpreter by talking to the judge's dog, who divulged embarrassing secrets only the dog would have known. The feats that Dr. Doolittle could achieve because of this one facility, talking to animals, were frequently mistaken for supernatural by the doctor's enemies. Cast into an African dungeon to be starved into submission, Dr. Doolittle grew fatter and jollier. Thousands of mice carried in food, one crumb at a time, with water in walnut shells, and even fragments of soap so he could wash and shave. His terrified captors naturally put it down to witchcraft, but we, the child readers, were privy to the simple and rational explanation. The same salutary lesson was rammed home again and again through these books. It might look like magic, and the bad guys thought it was magic. There was a rational explanation. I'm going to skip now right to the very end of the book, the last few paragraphs, the text of a speech I gave in honor of Christopher Hitchens, in his presence and shortly before he died. When I'd finished, he came up on the stage, we embraced, and he then valiantly, albeit with failing voice, and for a very long time, answered questions from the audience, all of whom knew that this was his swan song. He has inspired and energized and encouraged us. He has us cheering him on almost daily. He's even begotten a new word, the hitch slap. We don't just admire his intellect, we admire his pugnacity, his spirit, his refusal to countenance ignoble compromise, his forthrightness, his indomitable spirit, his brutal honesty. And in the very way he's looking his illness in the eye, he is embodying one part of the case against religion. Leave it to the religious to mewl and whimper at the feet of an imaginary deity in their fear of death. Leave it to them to spend their lives in denial of its reality. Hitch is looking death squarely in the eye, not denying it, not giving into it, but facing up to it squarely and honestly, and with a courage that inspires us all. Before his illness, it was as an erudite author and an essayist, a sparkling, devastating speaker, that this valiant horseman led the charge against the follies and lies of religion. Since his illness, he's added another weapon to his armory, and ours, perhaps the most formidable and powerful weapon of all. His very character has become an outstanding and unmistakable symbol of the honesty and dignity of atheism, as well as of the worth and dignity of the human being when not debased by the infantile babblings of religion. Every day he's demonstrating the falsehood of that most squalid of Christian lies, that there are no atheists in foxholes. Hitch is in a foxhole, and he is dealing with it with a courage and honesty and a dignity that any of us would be and should be proud to muster. And in the process, he is showing himself to be even more deserving of our admiration, respect, and love. I was asked to honor Christopher Hitchens today. I need hardly say that he does me the far greater honor by accepting this award in my name. Ladies and gentlemen, comrades, I give you Christopher Hitchens. That was a speech that I made when presenting him with what was called the Richard Dawkins Award, given by the American Atheist Alliance annually. He died shortly after that. The book is dedicated to his memory, and I've added to the book the following last words, which serve to bring us back to the word soul, and the special non-religious sense in which I'm using it in my title. This intrepid warrior for truth, this cultured, courteous citizen of the world, this devastating, coruscating enemy of lies and cant, well, maybe he has no immortal soul. None of us has. But in the only meaning of the words that makes any sense, the soul of Christopher Hitchens is among the immortals.